Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and I am with you recording this in lovely Escazú, Costa Rica on December 21st in the year 2025. It's a Sunday, and we are now experiencing sunset here, and I have a lot to say. And I'm sorry if this is not going to be full of Christmas cheer, but I think it's important to address the astrology now that we've gotten a little distance from the events of last weekend and what is coming up for us in February. So when I was away over Thanksgiving weekend, there were a lot of things going on for me and my friends, my Costa Rican family. And my one friend said, I'd rather speak up and be wrong than be sorry later. And so in that vein, I'm going to speak up about a few things. Last weekend, you may recall that I was talking about the changeover from Mars, with Mars in the sign of Sagittarius and then moving into the sign of Capricorn in the wee hours of Monday the 15th. And so in that time, Mars went, at 29 Sagittarius into a square with Neptune. And traditionally, Mars and Neptune are an odd pairing, especially when they're in a challenge to one another. And like I mentioned, and I've mentioned so many times on this podcast, they are somewhat insidious. And Mars is assertive, can be aggressive, and Neptune is something that comes through the back door. And when you put the two of them together, things can surface and secrets can come out and insidious acts be revealed and insidious acts happen. And there was a lot going on last weekend, a lot, and most unfortunately. And Mars, as we know, is the planet of war, and it's also a violent planet. It doesn't have to be. It could be a planet of confidence and courage and standing up for yourself, and that's how the good energy of Mars is. That's what we want to use it for. But then shortly after the square, Mars moved into Capricorn, and 0 degrees Capricorn is the cardinal axis. So all of these things made the news, and all of these things shocked people, and all of these things affected people. And many of us. And this isn't just some insidious act in your backyard. These were global events, all of them. And Mars being on the cardinal axis assisted with that getting out into the world and it being of a stressful nature. Now, in the astrology that we use in the Western astrology, as opposed to the Eastern astrology, we go by the seasons, and the seasons change as we have today. Happy solstice. The seasons change at 0 Capricorn, 0 Libra, 0 Cancer, and 0 Aries. And those are all the cardinal axis points. There are other cardinal axis points, such as 15 fixed, that would be 15 degrees of Scorpio and Taurus and Leo and Aquarius. And when we have planets, especially Mars, sitting there, then we can expect that something is going to make the news. But when Mars does something like square Saturn and Neptune, which haven't been together in 37 years, and then hits the cardinal axis, we are going to have a lot of news. And I want to talk about next February for a bit, and I urge you to get my look ahead at 2026, the Rebellion of Fire and Air, because I talk a lot about this in that class. It's only $55. You can DM me about it. You can go to my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, and buy it there. If you click book online, it will be in the list of things to purchase. And so one of the things that's so important about this is that we are going to have a lot of cardinal axis activity as Neptune and Saturn, who are getting revved up to go to the cardinal axis, will meet there, okay? They're going to meet, they're together now, right? But they're going to meet in exactitude at the cardinal axis, and that's going to happen February 20th. Prior to that, there's going to be a few things lining up. Mars will reach the cardinal axis on February 11th. It will hit 15 degrees of Aquarius on February 11th, then 12th. And just then, Neptune will already be at the cardinal axis again. So we're having Mars and Neptune connect with each other at the cardinal axis. Okay. You would say 15 degrees of Aquarius is not 0 degrees Aries, but they are connected. They are joined because of that relationship to the cardinal axis. And so once again, we are having another situation where Mars and Neptune are going to be connecting with one another. And in those days, there's going to be an eclipse, which is on the 17th of February. That eclipse is at 28 degrees of Aquarius, which is the United States moon. And so, with planets going to the cardinal axis, planets that have never met in our lifetime at this cardinal axis point, okay? So Saturn and Neptune in our lifetime have never been at 0 Aries. And they've been there separately, like earlier this year, but they weren't there together. They weren't there exactly together. They weren't there during an eclipse. They weren't there when Mars is at the cardinal axis. There were not these lineups of things lined up, ready to happen in mid-February. And so eclipses are wild cards. We don't know what they bring. And the last time the United States had an eclipse on its moon at 28 or so Aquarius, because countries have charts too, that was the Parkland shooting in Florida in 2018. And while I don't think this will necessarily be another shooting, but again, eclipses are wild cards, and I don't know what this will be. And like I said before COVID, Saturn and Pluto were getting together for the first time in 35 or so years. And we knew something was going to happen, but we astrologers didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I don't think we're having another COVID, but I have a great concern about next February and the Saturn-Neptune that will be some world event with Mars on the cardinal axis, having been there just a couple days before, and then an eclipse on the U.S. chart. This is a lot of activity for mid-February. This is a lot of important aligning of planets on the cardinal axis with eclipses. This is too big to ignore. And so I'm speaking up about it. I'm telling you about this, and I'm going to tell you that I think we're going to have an event. I don't know what that event is. Like I said, it's never the same, when eclipses are wild cards. So I don't think it's going to be another pandemic. I really don't. I don't think we're having another COVID. But I don't know what exactly this could be. There are pieces of it. There's the United States moon. There's Saturn and Neptune that get together and often indicate something with Russia, because Russia has had events every time Saturn and Neptune get together. The Russian Revolution, the fall of the Soviet Union, all of these things, Cold War, all of these things line up in Russia. That doesn't mean that there's something with those two specifically. It could be something insidious because Mars and Neptune are once again at the cardinal axis together. This is a lot. So while I cannot tell you, and I will feel more because I feel into these things, and as we get closer, I may feel something specific. I don't know. But I don't want to say that, we're having Saturn and Neptune, and isn't this amazing? Yes, on some level, there's a big change of the order of the universe. Something big is coming. But it's usually a global collective event that we don't expect necessarily, especially after an eclipse. But it's something that changes things forever. And it's not the same afterwards. Okay, so things are not the same. And even after last weekend, things are not the same. There's lots of stuff here that's not the same and not going to be the same, unfortunately. And we take a new view of things. We hear the news and we have a reaction to it and stuff. When we had Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter lining up together in 2020, and I didn't know what that was going to necessarily be, and it turned out to be a pandemic, it didn't affect everybody in the same way. It was horrible obviously in many ways, and we won't even go there, but that's suffice it to say that was horrible in many ways. But it didn't affect everybody the same way. And I think that world events don't necessarily affect everybody the same way. We can all agree on something, and we all agree that it's horrible or it's enlightening or it's powerful, or, the doors to something are going to open and we're going to be free in some respects and then maybe not free in other respects. Everybody's life gets affected differently because everybody's different and everybody's life is different and everybody has a different thing in their life, right? So I don't know. Again, I will tell you, I don't know. I can't tell you what it's going to be, but I know that when we are dealing with Aries, we are dealing with things that are very direct, very forthright, very abrupt, and then they're over. Like Aries, if you know an Aries, they lose their temper and then they're over it. They lose their temper and are over it. So it could be something very sharp, immediate, and then it's over. That's the nature of Aries. But then we've got all this like Aquarius stuff. So, and Pluto's in Aquarius, but Pluto is not on the cardinal axis. And, while the eclipse is revving up, the moon will pass over Mars and then go to meet the sun in the new moon that's going to be there. And we are going to get new information. So I wanted to give you a heads up. I want to tell you that something's coming that won't be the same anymore afterwards. I'm sorry to dump this on you right before Christmas, but I couldn't just sit here and go on and not mention how last week's aspects showed us something about what's coming in February. And it doesn't necessarily have to be violent. It could just be, okay, we're doing this now. Somebody makes a decision. Somebody in the world makes a decision and things are different. And that's it. It could be anything. So rarely the same as something we've seen before, but we want to be aware and just keep our antennas up for this kind of experience because it will inevitably reach all of us on some level. I'll say that. Your everyday life may not change from any of this. Did your everyday life change when the Soviet Union fell? Probably not. Like you saw it, you were like, wow, things are not the same in the world. Right. It trickles into our lives somehow. We get news, we talk about it. People are like, wow, can you believe that? And it didn't, like, where I was at that point in time, I wasn't really I wasn't traveling there or anything. I'm using myself as an easy example. It was in the news and it was profound, and I pinpointed the astrology, of course. But I want to say these things because don't be surprised when something comes in February. What can you do? You take care of your business. You live as clean a life as you can. You be responsible. You stay grounded because this energy right now is so overwhelming. It's intense and it's exhausting, and it's just not something that's easy to navigate. We've got to get through this, everybody together. We're all in this together. But you want to stay grounded during all of this because we don't have a lot of earth in the sky, and we're moving out of earth and water, remember, and we're moving into fire and air. So I really recommend taking care of your life, making sure everything's in alignment. Take up a practice that helps you, yoga, meditation, something that reaches other things other than, just going to the gym. Do something that expands your consciousness and connect with yourself on a deep level and connect with something greater than yourself, because that's what Saturn and Neptune at the end of the zodiac are asking us to do anyway. And surrender where you need to surrender. And I don't want you to be anxious. I don't want anyone to be anxious. I don't think there's a reason to be anxious. I think that this is a time to, have compassion and empathy and just be with each other together and do what you need to do in your life. Maybe when we get closer, we'll have more clues. There's always a war somewhere, right? So you can say, I expected that war, or a war someplace that you didn't expect, but there's always a war somewhere. There's wars in people's backyards. People are arguing, sibling rivalry, arguments, people get mad. But that doesn't mean that it has to be a global scale war. I don't I don't necessarily think it'll be that. But like I said, I don't know what this is. I know that something is coming that's going to be a global scale experience, and we're going to be sitting here watching what happens. So, okay, that being said, I'll be talking more about February as we go along in these months. And certainly, if you want to know where all of this is happening for you, maybe you have the moon at 28 Aquarius, then I suggest you set up a session with me, which is easy to do if you go to my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, and just click book online and you set up an astrology session. And, you know, in the meantime, we have to keep on going. And today is the solstice. Again, happy solstice. And then we are at 0 degrees Capricorn. So the sun is at 0 degrees Capricorn. The light starts to return, you know, in the northern hemisphere. Where I live doesn't do that. We don't have much more than 6 hours of daylight at any time. And sometimes it happens, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sometimes it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So the light returns in the northern hemisphere. And, when we are experiencing this, I remember my mother used to say, right around New Year's, we start to notice that the days are getting longer, the light's coming back. Yeah, because it's about 10 days after now, right? So we have some interesting astrology this week, Christmas week, and a lot of it involves Venus. So Venus is in Sagittarius, and she's where Mars was, and she's where the sun was. Remember, the sun followed, Mars went first, then the sun. And now Venus is moving along in the same areas that everything else is, Mars and the sun. And Venus is at 26 Sagittarius as I speak, and she is making an inconjunct to the planet Uranus in the wee hours of tomorrow morning, Eastern Time, 1:22 a.m. And then she's squaring Neptune, just like everybody else did. And she squared Saturn yesterday, okay? She did her square to Saturn yesterday, or early this morning if you are in the Eastern Time zone, or today in the afternoon if you are Sunday the 21st in Europe or something. But Venus made her square to Saturn, and now she's making the square to Neptune. That's Tuesday the 23rd in Pacific Time zone, 9:31 p.m., but Wednesday, Christmas Eve, in the wee hours, 12:31 a.m. New York time or Eastern Time. And Venus squares Neptune, Venus in Sag, Neptune in Pisces. This is a very idealistic transit. This is a very interesting dynamic considering Mars and the Sun have come before her. And she's getting ready to leave Sagittarius, where she's having a good time. And she's doing the Christmas party thing and the Christmas shopping thing and maybe a little bit of overindulgence thing. And she's, with Neptune, creating maybe a little romance, a little fantasy, a little visionary, creative energy. This is a great time to get creative. So maybe you're setting up for the holidays. Maybe you are going on vacation to someplace exotic and beautiful, and that will certainly be a Venus-Neptune kind of energy, right? So it's a little love, a little fantasy, a little romance, a little beauty, a little vision. What do I want my vacation to be like? But this is also a good time to do a visionary exercise, to connect with something you want to create in your life. This is deeply creative. It doesn't mean artistic necessarily, but we're all creative. And so what do you want to create in your life now? What is your vision? What is a vision that you'd like to see evolve in your life? This is a great time to do that. Then she will enter Capricorn, which is 11:26 a.m. Christmas Eve. And that is Eastern Time, and she's going to be in very sober Capricorn. So then we will have Mars and the Sun and Venus all in Capricorn. So just Mercury will be staying in Sag till New Year's. And so it'll be somewhat sobering, somewhat practical. Maybe the gifts you are buying will be very practical. Or maybe you did the Venus and Sag thing and bought some wild gifts and now they sort of fall flat when you give them because Venus is in Capricorn and we're in a different mindset. So it could be any of those. But we are looking at some very, dreamy things with Venus and Neptune. And, it's also Venus is in the sign of knowledge with Sag and travel. So maybe you've got a beautiful vacation coming up. And then we're going to get some action with Mercury later in the week on Saturday when it makes a trine to Chiron, Saturday the 27th. And that gives us some insight into our wounds, how we are healing ourselves, how we're feeling, and, anything also that's been passing at the end of Sag, like the Sun, and like Venus, and like Mars, has made a trine to Chiron because they've, Chiron's in Aries and they've connected in that way. So Venus did that last week, you'll recall. And so it's an interesting dynamic that Chiron is getting so much attention because it means that there is a touch of, connecting with where we feel maybe somewhat wounded, or we're trying to do some healing for ourselves as the holidays show up. And, I'm glad there's no eclipses on the holidays. I'm glad there's no Christmas eclipse because we've had those before, in fact, in 2019 to 2020. But this is a relatively quiet week. So I don't expect a lot, except that we still have Saturn and Neptune together at the end of the zodiac. So again, navigating that is about surrender. It's about letting go. It's about paying attention to what area of your life is about to undergo some big changes. And it's about allowing those changes to happen and helping those changes along. Have you sat down with yourself and said, what do I want my life to look like? What new things? How do I want to create a new life? Like I said earlier, what's your vision? But what does it feel like to be in your life when it's new? I've done a lot of that work this year, especially in these last 6 months, about what new life I want and how I'm creating that through my meditative states. And what do I want that to look like when I'm on the other side of it? It's easy to be grateful when we have received something and it's already happened. But if you're grateful for something new now, ahead of its happening, then you're going to draw that to you even more quickly, your new life, right? So start being grateful for what your new life feels like and how excited you are in this new life. What does that feel like? And using Venus's energy this week, with all this Venus activity, this is a great time to make that projection, to connect with what it is that you're trying to create and start creating it and be grateful for it ahead of its presence in your life. In the meantime, when we last left our Christmas village in San Joaquin de Flores, Costa Rica, you'll recall a year ago when I went there and we had the Rompope incident, right? So since my last podcast last week, I have been there twice. Yes, Astro Darlings, twice. I was there on Tuesday night and I was there last night. And we have a report from the field. On Tuesday night, it was very quiet. We went there, just three of us, Monica, Alejandro, and I went there, and we showed up at the door of the scene of the crime, where, it's like the front part of this house. It's almost like a patio, but it's an indoor patio. And they have a Christmas scene, they have a nativity scene, and everything's on strings. I have to post that on Instagram. Everything's on strings, and you'll see the whole nativity scene right directly across from where our little abuela sits and sells the rompope. And on Tuesday night, the police were sitting right outside that door. And Monica said, I think it's because of the incident. And I said, you think so? You think it's because of the incident? The Mars retrograde incident. And I remember it so well because it was December 6th, and it was an hour after Mars had gone retrograde. And it was when it was in Leo, and it was when we got there an hour after Mars went retrograde. And there it was, this first incident of Mars retrograde with Rompope flying into the face of this poor abuela. Yes, so that did not happen this year, okay? That did not happen this year. Thankfully for that poor woman. And of course, Mars is not retrograde this year, so sneak attack, right? With Rompope. So we went and had a really lovely time on Tuesday night. We visited them. We saw the Christmas lights. It was pretty quiet. And then last night we went, and there's like a soccer field nearby. And Tuesday night it was empty. And they usually have a little fair where you can buy things and stuff and trinkets and little handmade goods and stuff. And even rice cookers. They had rice cookers there. But when we went last night, they had those little stands, but there was a whole carnival there. There were rides. There were, all sorts of games and things. There was cotton candy. It was like a small town carnival, and kids were screaming on the rides, and it was full of activity. It was rocking last night. And then I think the Alajuela football team won some tournament, and everybody was driving down the street honking their horns, like jingle bells on their car horn, but also, and I thought it was just because of Christmas, but they were telling me no, it's also because of this big soccer win that they had. So we had a good time. We did not go on rides. Those days are gone, but we observed everybody, and we were taking pictures and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And we went down the street, which was blocked off, and police were there, but they were not in front of the scene of the Rompope incident. They were just in the area, probably because they knew there were going to be a lot of people there. So they set up these rides in the last few days, and everybody was out there having a great time. And we saw this one little stop where they were selling, everybody's selling rompope, they're selling sweets, they're selling treats, they're selling like Christmas candies and stuff. And there was this one place where they had all the little Christmas village items, like a little church, a little house, ice skaters, Ferris wheels, all those things, but they had them in multitude, and it was all in this one room. And Monica was saying to me on Tuesday night, this was not here. This was not open. So everybody was out in fine form last night, and it was so festive and so lovely. And there were 8 of us. We went, 3 kids and 5 adults, and we just had a really lovely, lovely time. So if you want to see some of it, I've posted it on Instagram. And thankfully, there were no more scenes in that moment. So Venus is already stepping up and being peaceful, and the police were there, so nothing was going to happen. And in the meantime, we have just Mercury lingering in Sag after Venus finishes up this week, and then Mercury then will also pass through Sag and touch all the outer planets, move into Capricorn to the cardinal axis, and then we'll have a lot of energy in Capricorn next week. But it's very interesting how each planet is taking their turn. They don't always do this. Mars isn't usually next to the inner planets during an event like this, where we're seeing a lot of activity with the outer planets. It's usually doing its own thing because Mars doesn't always stay close to the Sun and Mercury and Venus. But as we move through this time, we will be paying attention to any other unusual events that are marked by Saturn and Neptune, okay? And I really hope that you get my lecture that I gave, my presentation about 2026, the Rebellion of Fire and Air. Go to my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, click book online, and it's there. Or you can email me, info@thegoldenastrologer.com, and deb@debmcbride.com. I haven't been on Instagram this week, and I'll tell you for real, there was just so much bad news last week. And even in my personal life, friends had some bad news or they were sad. And it was sad news. And I got sadness from people, sadness from the world. And I was like, it was just so heavy. And then finally, on Friday evening, I got the best news I've gotten all week, which is that my friend, one of my friends here in Costa Rica, who is a doctor, she got a bunny. And she sends me a picture of herself with a bunny. And I was like, you got a rabbit? And she was doing research for her boyfriend because his 14-year-old daughter wanted a bunny. And she said, well, let me look into this. And then she realized when she was looking into all this that she wanted a bunny. So she got a Holland Lop, a lilac Holland Lop, a Harlequin lilac Holland Lop. And it's the cutest boy. He was born 2 months ago. And he's just adorable. And it sounds like he loves her very much and she loves him. So that was the best news I've gotten all week. And then yesterday we had such a beautiful time at the festival, the feria, that I think hopefully things are looking up for now. Much happiness and joy to you during this next holiday week, Christmas Day, and Hanukkah ends tomorrow, and Kwanzaa begins at the end of the week. So I wish you much love and gratitude and beauty and thanks for listening to me this whole year. I'll be back next weekend, Sunday the 28th, to tell you about the New Year's and the beginning of 2026, that first couple of days. In the meantime, join me in session. Join me in session for our new year. Get a forecast for yourself. Click book online in my website and set yourself up with an astrology session. Or if you feel you need a nice Reiki session to give yourself some cleansing of the old year, we can do that. That's on my website to book as well. If you want to start the new year off going into mentoring with me, certainly do that. We have 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. That'll get you through these next months and all the big events in February. And I wish you a wonderful holiday if you're celebrating. Thank you for listening, and gratitude to each and every one of you. And I'll see you on the internet. Have a beautiful week.